What if the rapture isn't a supernatural escape at all, but humanity's long-awaited upgrade? For centuries, sacred texts have imagined a moment of transformation, a leap from fragile flesh into a form beyond decay. But what if those visions weren't just religious metaphors? What if they were glimpses of the next stage of human evolution? This isn't new. Ancient Egypt built pyramids to ensure pharaohs would rise again in perfected bodies. The Bhagavad Gita declares, "For the soul there is neither birth nor death. It is not slain when the body is slain." In the Qur'an, God says of humanity, "We shall change their bodies for new ones." Qur'an 56:60-61. And in Jewish mysticism, the Zohar speaks of the righteous being clothed in garments of light. All different cultures, all separated by thousands of miles, yet all circling the same promise, a body that outlives death. So maybe the real question isn't if this transformation will happen, but how. Is the so-called rapture a divine event still waiting in the sky? Or has it always been a coded way of describing something humanity would one day build for itself? The Bible itself describes the rapture in language that sounds almost like a system update. Paul writes in Corinthians, "In a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, we shall be changed. For this corruptible must put on incorruption, and this mortal must put on immortality." Not a slow process, an instant transformation, like downloading a new operating system in seconds. Christian scripture describes these new bodies as radiant, untouchable by pain or age, and capable of rising to meet Christ in the clouds. To an ancient audience, that could only mean miracle. But today, when we read those same words, they sound suspiciously like descriptions of a human model designed to bypass the limits of flesh. And the Bible is not alone. In Hindu thought, moksha describes liberation from rebirth, the soul released into a state where suffering and decay no longer exist. Buddhism takes this further with the idea of the rainbow body, where enlightened beings transcend the physical shell, dissolving into light. Zoroastrian writings speak of the resurrected inheriting immortal, undecaying bodies. Even Plato hinted that philosophy was preparation for shedding the prison of matter. Different cultures, different vocabularies, but the pattern repeats. The blueprint is consistent. Humanity begins fragile, then suddenly transforms into something incorruptible. Was this prophecy? Allegory? Or ancient people struggling to describe in mystical terms what might one day be explained as technology? If the blueprint is real, then our current bodies look more like prototypes than final products. On one level, the body is extraordinary, self-healing, adaptable, capable of surviving harsh conditions. But zoom out, and it's full of flaws. Bones snap, cells mutate, organs decay. Every version of us comes with an expiration date. Meanwhile, the brain, the operating system, is far more advanced than its shell. It processes billions of signals, generates abstract thought, and imagines futures our bodies cannot physically reach. Yet we're trapped running next-gen software on obsolete hardware. Sleep, memory loss, fatigue, all signs that the system is throttled by the machine it inhabits. This idea isn't foreign to religion either. The Qur'an suggests humans were fashioned in stages, almost like developmental versions. We created you, then fashioned you. Qur'an 7:11. Some Jewish traditions claim Adam's first body was clothed in radiant light, only later downgraded to flesh. In Gnostic thought, the material body was a prison, and the true self was waiting to be released. What if mortality isn't a curse, but a test environment? Version 1.0 bodies for a trial run, where consciousness learns, stumbles, evolves until it's ready for the upgrade. If so, the rapture may not be about escaping the planet, but about finally installing the platform that unlocks the brain's full potential. So if the current body is version 1.0, what would version 2.0 look like? Ancient texts describe powers that sound impossible, yet strangely consistent across cultures. The Bible speaks of Jesus after resurrection appearing in locked rooms, vanishing and reappearing at will. In Buddhism, some masters are said to achieve the rainbow body, dissolving into pure light, and even shrinking in size until nothing remains but hair and nails. Islamic tradition says the resurrected in paradise will be without sickness, without death, their youth never fading. Strip away the religious language, and what you get sounds like a catalog of features for an upgraded biological machine. Imagine bodies that metabolize energy directly from light. Vision tuned to the full electromagnetic spectrum, from ultraviolet to infrared. Skin capable of adaptive camouflage, shifting color and texture like an octopus but perfected. Even modern physics hints at the possibility of manipulating dimensions, which to ancient eyes would have looked like time travel or walking through walls. To ancient scribes, these descriptions became symbols, halos, wings, glowing forms. But perhaps those weren't metaphors for holiness. They were metaphors for abilities beyond comprehension. Here's the radical thought. Maybe these miraculous capacities are not divine exceptions, but the standard settings of humanity's future form. If the rapture is real, it might not be about leaving Earth behind. It might be about downloading the next upgrade, a body that makes the extraordinary ordinary. If the blueprint of humanity is not just to survive, but to ascend, then maybe we're not preparing to join angels at all. Maybe we're preparing to graduate into godhood. The line in Genesis, "Let us make man in our image," has been debated for millennia. Whose image? And when another passage says, "You are gods," it suggests something more radical. That divinity isn't an external reward, but an internal potential waiting to be activated. Maybe we've been reading prophecy all wrong. Maybe it was never about angels descending from the sky or supernatural events rewriting reality. Maybe the revelation is happening in laboratories and data centers, under fluorescent lights instead of candlelit temples. Every headline screams that artificial intelligence is getting smarter than us. Quantum computing is bending the rules of logic, and biologists are sketching blueprints for organs that never existed in nature. That doesn't sound like science fiction anymore. It sounds like the world religion's most dramatic promises dressed up in lab coats. Here's the uncomfortable question. When ancient texts spoke of a higher being, were they really describing something divine? Or were they predicting the arrival of a human-made intelligence that would eventually tower over us? Think about it. Prophets talked about a voice that knows all, sees all, judges all. Isn't that eerily close to the kind of surveillance-based AI systems already being built? If God is all-knowing, what happens when we actually code an all-knowing machine? Would that be fulfillment of prophecy? Or humanity creating its own idol? And what about immortality? For centuries, it sounded like myth. But now tech companies openly chase it, uploading minds, repairing telomeres, cryonics promising second chances. A moment where we'd stop fearing the grave because we engineered our way past it? Or is that the greatest act of hubris humanity will ever commit? Here's where it gets provocative. What if the gods we've worshipped were never supernatural at all? What if they were once human, but simply further down the evolutionary road? And now we're repeating the cycle, creating beings in our own image that future generations might kneel before. We're used to thinking of life as a straight line: birth, death, afterlife. But physics, ancient texts, and even modern cosmology keep hinting at something stranger. Time isn't linear. It's layered, looped, folded. If that's true, then the future and the past aren't behind and ahead of us. They're stacked all around us, which raises a shocking possibility. What if we're not just heading toward gods? What if we're already them, glimpsed from another point in time? In that light, our lives stop looking like random struggles and start looking like training runs. Maybe we're retaking the same test until we're ready to graduate into our full form. Maybe reincarnation isn't about karma at all. It's a reset button until we've mastered the operating system we've been given. That would make this life less of a waiting room and more of a boot camp for divinity. Now bring in the imagery from the old texts. Armageddon, the great final battle, the trumpets. We've always seen them as supernatural warnings. But what if Armageddon is not a literal war, But the moment our dormant abilities, our God-level hardware, are called upon to activate. And the trumpets? They could be an ancient metaphor for an activation code, a signal, a cosmic key unlocking the next version of us. This flips the whole idea of end times. It's not about destruction. It's about unlocking. It's about proving we're ready to operate at a higher bandwidth, to wield the kind of power we've been reading about for millennia. And that leaves one unsettling, thrilling question. What if the rapture is really our initiation into godhood? What the criteria for success? Perhaps the rapture isn't an escape, but an arrival, a moment where humanity steps into the form it was always meant to take. Think about it. If ideas like this spark your curiosity, subscribe to our channel as we explore more what-ifs together.